What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, if you're new around here, you haven't done it yet, or you're living under a rock, I don't know what you're waiting for. Be like most people, hit that subscribe button now so you never miss another Sit Down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another look at another mafia topic. And throughout the years of the mafia, there are very few more recognizable people than Vincent Gigante. Gigante would rule the Genovese crime family for a long period of time through a crazy act that he developed in the late 60s. Gigante had come up under the tutelage of egomaniac Vito Genovese. He got his start in Greenwich Village and took it all the way to the top. There's not a lot known about his brothers. He had four of them, and they mostly were involved in the mafia outside of one of them who became a Catholic priest. Today, we're going to talk about one of his brothers, Mario Gigante, an individual who ended up having a very long career in the mafia. He would stretch through multiple levels of earning. He'd even be involved with waste hauling, and it would put him away for his control of almost 14 waste hauling companies. The story of Mario Gigante next on Sit Down Shorts. Mario Gigante was born in 1923 in New York City. His family, as we know, would live in Greenwich Village on Sullivan Street and would really remain there and have a home there for most of the life of Vincent and Mario Gigante. Now, Mario actually was 5 years older than his brother Vincent. Vincent would be born in 1928, as I said. Mario was in 1923. Now, as we know, Vincent Gigante would enter into the mafia after a stint in boxing and would become the driver for Vito Genovese. In 1957, he would attempt to kill mob boss Frank Costello in Central Park West. He would ultimately beat those charges, as we know, after Frank Costello would not identify him and they had no viable witness to take Vincent down. During the 60s, Vincent would continue to ascend towards the top of the Genovese crime family. And during that time, he would control what was called the Greenwich Village crew. That would be created by Vito Genovese way back in the 20s and 30s. And once Vito made his ascent and ended up going to prison, Vincent would take over the Greenwich Village crew. His brother Mario would slot right in and very much take up his namesake with his brother in the Greenwich Village crew. Now, the Greenwich Village crew is powerful. It would involve many powerful people, including, as I said, Vito Genovese, Tommy Aboli, Anthony Bender Strallo, and others. In the 60s, though, one of the big ways that Mario Gigante was making money was through the smuggling of contraband cigarettes. And interestingly enough, in 1966, the feds were watching this individual, Anthony Granada. Granada was a Colombo soldier based out of Bath Beach, Brooklyn, and he had a major business of smuggling contraband cigarettes from the southern states up into New York through a trucking company he had. It was alleged by the powers that be that Mario Gigante was one of the chief financial backers of that little piece of work involving Granada. And Granada would ultimately be hemmed up in that, and it was brought to the forefront that Gigante was involved as a financer in that little piece of work. Now, during the 70s, Mario Gigante would move into the area of Yonkers, Westchester County, and he would actually have a home in Yonkers. And that would be where he would start really earning a lot of money. And through all this, he's making connections in the garbage hauling business, doing cigarette smuggling, bookmaking. But in Yonkers, he would kind of connect with an individual, one of his underlings, Michael Vadola. In the 80s, he would be hemmed up in a pretty big racketeering loan sharking indictment. And the feds would allege that Mario Gigante was a big time loan shark, and he would use exorbitant rates and nefarious ways to collect that money. He would also be involved in possibly the assault and or threatening of debtors, including an individual called Ralph Cirabella. And in the trial, one of the prosecutors would ask Gigante, was he involved and what went on with Mr. Cirabella? Gigante would kindly respond, quote, I never struck Cirabella. I never threatened him, and he does not owe me $210,000. So, there was obviously some very interesting things that have come out in this trial about possibly the involvement Mario Gigante had in loan sharking. It would also come out that Vadola would constantly drop Gigante's name, that if he didn't pay or they didn't pay, they would have to deal with the very famous Gigante family, and that he was very connected in the Genovese crime family. Now, ultimately, for Mario Gigante, he would go to prison for this. He would get 8 years for this little stunt involving loan sharking in the Yonkers area. And this would set up a pretty high profile involvement of some pretty high level characters. Once he was convicted and got a prison sentence, his brother Vincent Gigante would try to use the powerful connections that he had by this point in being one of the high ups in the Genovese crime family and try to get his brother a little bit of a sentence reduction. In the mid 80s, he, through power broker and lawyer Roy Cohen, would attempt to bribe the powers that be to get Mario a sentence reduction. By this point, Mario Gigante was very integral to the intricacies of Vincent Gigante's ruse, and he knew that he needed Mario to continue this stuff. For most parts of Vincent Gigante's career, Mario Gigante and Quiet Dom Cirillo were the messengers for him and his operation. And at one point, the feds would allege Mario was basically helping Vincent run the family at that point. So we knew that he needed emissaries, and Mario was one of them. He needed Mario out of prison. So he goes to Roy Cohen and instructs Vincent the Fish Cafaro, who was a soldier in the family, to start delivering payments to Roy Cohen and his partner, Thomas Bolin. On 3 separate occasions, Cafaro would tell the FBI he would indeed become a rat. He would tell the FBI that he was delivering money directly to Roy Cohen's law firm, and that Roy Cohen wanted $175,000 to get the sentence reduced to 6 years. Through the powers that be, they would come into contact with this individual, Alphonse D'Amato, former New York senator. And weirdly enough, Gigante was sprung after 6 years. Now, no one could ever contend or bring charges to this. No one ever got jammed up in this. There was no bribes that were ever uncovered. But it was alleged by Cafaro that he regularly delivered payments to Bolin and Cohen, and that this acted as a way to spring him early. So, again, we can't ever, we have nothing on paper that this happened, but this was alleged. And there were wiretaps that involved Bolin saying he knew what this money was for, that sort of thing. It was kind of just a high profile thing that was pretty interesting. Roy Cohen got things done. It's that simple. That's why he's one of the greatest defense attorneys in the history of America. And it's why people like Donald Trump and others use Cohen for the successful lawyer that he was. As I said, during all these indictments and things like that, Mario is becoming a very rich man. He's making a lot of money, and his brother is the purveyor of the largest criminal syndicate in America by this point. What he's doing is making a lot of connections in another very lucrative business, especially if you know the Genovese family. The Genovese family has always been very involved in garbage. Or not, we don't want that picture. We want this picture, garbage. That is something that not only them, but the Gambino family has controlled for a while. And during his involvement in the mob, Mario Gigante would meet this individual, Thomas Milo. Milo was the president and owner of a company called Suburban Carding. They were a high level and frankly the biggest carding company in that Westchester, area towards Yonkers. They basically controlled the carding industry. And he and Gigante were involved in multiple companies that really had a monopoly on garbage and carding in that area. And the feds would allege in the mid 90s that they would use arson, intimidation, assault, extortion, and basically control that business. And in 1996, Milo and Mario Gigante would be involved in a 61 count indictment that would allege they used tactics, bully tactics, to control the carding industry. It was also alleged that Mario Gigante was evading taxes and he owed the government more than $1 million in tax revenue. Also involved in this indictment was the son of Mario Gigante, Salvatore. Ultimately, they would all plead guilty, and Mario Gigante would serve about 5 years in federal prison. He would be released in 2001. Now, over the last 20 years or so, Mario Gigante lived a relatively nondescript life. We know he gained a lot of power, and through the convictions of his brother, he was a living legend in the Genovese crime family. But he had gotten older. He was in his late 70s and into his 80s, and he had pretty much retired. Now, in 2011, an interesting report would come out yearly, which would be filed by the ILA, the New York Waterfront, and they would kind of disclose some of the financial things that were going on inside the New York waterfronts. And I really just quickly want to talk about the success that the Gigante family has had many years after the conviction and death of kind of the patriarch of the family, Vincent Gigante. In 2011, it was alleged that 11 different members of the Gigante family held high level jobs on the New York waterfront, and that several of them were earning salaries in the hundreds, 400,000, $100,000 a year jobs in the New York waterfront. And most of the Gigantes had been set financially for life. Son-in-laws, cousins, nephews were all making money on the New York waterfront. We have to feel like Mario Gigante had his hand in at least something over the last 20 years. The Gigante family will never struggle financially. And you have to really look at what Gigante did, I think, is one of the more fascinating stories in the mob. He had this ruse for 30 years. He went to prison, but most of his family was pretty much spared, and they now live in luxury for the rest of their lives due to the success that their father had as the boss of the Genovese crime family. Now, in March of 2022, Mario Gigante would die of natural causes at the age of 98 years old. We can contend that for about 70 plus years of his life, Mario Gigante was a stone cold gangster. He did his time. There were threats at one point that he was a very vicious individual, maybe not a cold blooded killer, but he'd definitely be willing to give you a smack upside the head. He made a lot of money and was really the eyes and ears of his brother. And without him, maybe his brother doesn't have as much success. We forget about the brother of Vincent Gigante, Mario, who died last week at the age of 98. May he rest in peace. As always, thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoy it, hit the like and subscribe button. We'll see you next time here on the